Welcome to the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. My name is Chris Schad. I'm a writer for the Viking Age Zone Coverage, Bring Me the News, and the Brookings Register. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day, but however you consume us, make sure you rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. My guest is the managing editor and a contributor for zonecoverage.com. He writes about the Vikings. He writes about the Twins. I don't know. He might do some wild stuff too, but they don't matter because they just wallow in mediocrity. His name is Tom Schreier. Thank you, Tom, for taking time to join the show. So you're headed down to Florida to cover some Twins spring training here in the next couple of days.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I apologize. I had some audio issues. There's a little different interface than we've used before, and I was trying to figure out how to connect something to my iPad or my earphones or whatever, and like AirPods and to my microphone here. So yeah, a little technical difficulties, but yes, I am cranking away here. It's a weird time of the year, right? Where the Wild are, I guess, on a winning streak, but we've kind of seen this before. The Twins are about to, we're about to go down to spring training to cover them. And then the Vikings, it's a lot of Kirk Cousins talk and whatnot because the Super Bowl's over and we don't have football until training camp in August.
Well, it's not spring until Byron Buxton's knee explodes in center field, trying to. No, too soon.
I mean,
should I not go there?
They're hoping he stays healthy. I'm curious. I'll be down. I'm looking as it like snow falls here for I think the first time in like 3 months. I'm heading down to Fort Myers to see what's going on with the team, and obviously still will be keeping track of anything going on with the Vikings and kind of what should be a pretty pivotal offseason.
I will say before we move on, I have to give a compliment to Twins fans because today is Valentine's Day as we're recording this, and I have not seen the Byron Buxton Valentine, you make me weak in the knees type of meme that usually goes out there. But I honestly hope he's okay. I mean, it would be awesome if he returned to center field. It's just understandable to be skeptical, but another thing to be skeptical about is the pending return of Kirk Cousins, which leads us to our episode tradition of breaking into Kirk Watch 2024. You might have heard, Tom, that Kirk Cousins is a free agent. He made the rounds on Media Road with his blazing hot honey barbecue wings during Super Bowl week. And he danced at the NFL Honors, which is not quite the Taylor Swift duet I was predicting, but it's just enough. So let's start here. Are the Wilfs going to throw money at Kirk Cousins like he's Magic Kirko this offseason, or what are they going to do, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think they're going to pay him. I've been talking to a lot of people about it, both, obviously our group here at Zone Coverage, but then just friends of mine kind of asking me what's going on. And the hardest thing is obviously if you could just say, hey, let's do 1 year, $30 million, you get it up front. It's your money. We're going to try to get you back to where you were, against San Francisco on Monday night, even kind of where he was against the Packers in Lambeau Field before the non-contact injury. I think everyone would do that. I mean, I guess there's people that just don't want to watch Kirk Cousins, and there's, he's a polarizing figure, but I think most people would say, yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to screw up a 1 year deal. It's fine. That's fully guaranteed. Look at what he was doing last year. We got to see what he is. I think he's entering age 35 season, coming off an Achilles tear, right? I think the issue is we know he plays hardball. We know that, like, he talks about how he has a guy, right? And I think there's some truth that some of these guys have like a camp and like a group of people that manage them. He has a singular manager, but that guy is, my understanding is he's kind of a bulldog, right? I mean, he's a guy who understands negotiation. He's doing his job, I guess, in the sense that like Kirk Cousins has 4th round pick. I was kind of drafted to be a backup. Cousins has, cashed in, I guess, on whatever success he's had, right? And I think you're probably looking at like a 2 year, $60 million deal. And I still think they take it. I still think they pay him. I think it's so much more risky because of his age and because, like, if you draft the quarterback of the future, he may be ready. Ideally, he's ready in 2 years, right? And like, then what do you do with Cousins? So I don't know. It's complicated as it is always with negotiations.
It is funny. There's two sides to Kirk Cousins, right? Like during the season, it's kind of this goofball, aw shucks, kind of dad-like figure that we saw in quarterback. But the side we didn't see in quarterback was pardon the wrestling term, there's going to be a few of them, but I call him the head of the negotiating table, where he goes in, he puts his finger in the sky and he goes, acknowledge me. And the Wolves just go, yes, we'll give you whatever you want, Kirk. We just don't make us watch Josh Dobbs or Nick Mullins or Darren Hall. Like you are the tribal chief. Yes, my tribal chief. Here is another ironclad contract. Like, I've asked this before. We had Marissa Voss on the show a couple weeks ago. Like, how desperate should the Vikings be? Because you look at $30 million over 2 years, it seems like Tom Pelissero said there's going to be an aggressive market for him as well.
Yeah.
And Kirk's kind of doing the Adam Thielen, like, well, guys, I'd really like to stay here, but that's not my decision. That's up to the Vikings. Like, how far should the Vikings go to bring him back?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was different. Thielen, in some ways, I was surprised to let him go. It was so weird. I remember it was like the Vikings brought us out. This would be like in April, right after the draft, to show us film on all the players they drafted. This is kind of why we got them. Here's Addison's route running. Here's, Mekhi Blackman. Here's whatever. And like, even going into like Jaron Hall and stuff. And like, you get out of that meeting and you get an email from the Vikings and it's like, it's formatted, right? It's often just like an anonymous player, like, hey, they've elevated this guy from the practice squad, or they released this guy, right? And it's like someone in the back of the locker room who often like I haven't talked to, right? And it's just like in there, it's like Adam Thielen from from Minnesota Mankato or whatever, Detroit Lakes cut, and you're like, wait, they just cut, and I know it like it was possible that this could happen, but like I was like, that's just weird. That's how I found out that he was cut right after a film session about who they drafted. And I think Thielen might be a little different. Thielen was more defiant. It's like, I still got it. I mean, I know someone who his buddy was like somehow on a plane like next to Thielen, and Thielen's on his phone showing him close, being like, dude, I still have my speed, stuff like that, right? And I think that was more Kwesi going, hey, we got to bring you down to what would be a receiver 3 level, right? And Thielen going, nope, I'll go sign with Carolina, right? And like, that is what it is. I mean, I think it's like a 3-year deal. You got paid, but like, I think Cousins a little different. Cousins, the tone I got, and he wasn't really like committal any direction, but like in that little scrum he had with the media, it was more like, hey, I get it. I'm coming off an Achilles injury, but I'm not a mobile quarterback. I know how to run an NFL offense. I've had success with Kevin O'Connell. And like, he didn't say it, but like, it's kind of like, what is the alternative? And that's kind of what it is. I actually don't believe, like, from the Wilf standpoint, I think the Wilf say, hey, we're going to invest in like X amount of money to build the facility, X amount, they pitched in for the stadium. And then like, our goal is to win. Right. And that's the, I mean, that sounds good in the abstract, but that's what gets argued, right? Should they be trying to win every year? Having said that, they're like, we're going to invest whatever we need to. It's just, you have to be right. And I think if you're Kwesi, you go, well, I don't think we're going with like Tannehill or Baker Mayfield. I mean, maybe that's the direction they go. I don't think it's like, the thing is, I just don't think one of those 3 guys are going to drop. Like, it's not like a Jaden Daniels tumble. If anything, he probably will raise his stock with the combine. I don't see like a Drake May. Like, how the hell is he like a Will Levis type fall, right? And I think like, you just can't think like Penix or JJ McCarthy. Like, you can't just throw that guy in the fire and be like, hey, we expect to win right now. You think of like Cousins, who's a pretty smart guy, veteran quarterback, had trouble learning Kevin O'Connell's system, right? And I think some guy like a McCarthy or whatever, I know like Penix is like an older player, but like, they're not going to be able to pick that up right away. They'd need a year. So I see it more as like, what I read between the lines and kind of, sitting in that press conference, taking notes on it with O'Connell or with Kwesi, is like, O'Connell for sure wants him. Like, he just wants the best quarterback he can give him, right? And I think, and he seems to like Cousins a lot. And like, Kwesi's going, I want him. I he wouldn't say it, but it's like he wants it at like the most affordable deal possible, because we don't know what Kirk Cousins is. Like, even if they draft a quarterback who isn't good, right? Even if, like, let's say they get McCarthy and he gets in the NFL and you go, oh, this guy's not ready, and at best he's like 3-4 years out, we still don't know what Cousins is next year, just given the nature of the injury and given his age. Having said that, like, yes, he's going to negotiate. I don't think it's going to be a hometown discount. I think he sees it as someone would maybe throw $90 million at me, right? And I'm going to take 60 for 2 years, and that's the discount, right? But it's not, I'm taking a year for 30. Thanks for whatever, however much they paid him, since that guaranteed contract, the 84 million guaranteed. Thanks for all that. Thanks for the times. Glad you got a, coach that supports me. I don't think there's any of that. I think he's going to go, yeah, I want 2 years, 60. I think he thinks he can be the quarterback. I think he thinks he can play until he's like 40. I think most of these guys do. And the Vikings need to figure out, hey, how do we get him to a number that makes sense for us, or what's our alternative?
And that's what he said to Mike Florio in a Pro Football Talk interview, that Tom Brady played until he was 45. Drew Brees played until he's whatever. We're talking about, well, I'm not a running quarterback anyway. Well, here's two things that kind of need to be considered in this situation. Kirk, yes, he's not a running quarterback, but he's not a quarterback that moves well in the pocket. He can't avoid the rush, and he's a sitting duck. When you have the holes that the Vikings have, that we will get to in just a second, I don't know, how do you get a guard? How do you get a lot of these players that you need for Kirk Cousins to succeed? Because he's not Patrick Mahomes in the sense that, no matter what is happening around him, he's going to giggle and like lead his Super Bowl winning touchdown drive. Like Kirk Cousins, we've been in this game of whack-a-mole for 6 years where he needs a coach that likes him and a lead offensive coordinator. He needs the 49ers situation, which I know is like the greatest love story that wasn't written by Taylor Swift. But I mean, that's what he needs. He needs elite players everywhere. And when I look at this here, like if you bring Kirk Cousins back, you have to go full Rams in Kwesi's words. In fact, you got to go full Kirk. You got to kick down money down the road. You got to say, fuck them picks. You got to bring all pros in at every situation, and you have to hit 100% on your draft picks. And if I'm Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa with 2 years left on my 4-year deal, I'm sitting there going like, this just isn't possible. But you got Larry, Lemmy, Lammy, Ziggy, Zaggy, and the rest of the Wilf family sitting there going like, well, we need a quarterback. What are we going to do at quarterback? Like this is just a mess. And like, what do you think? If they bring Kirk back, like how do they field a team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have to go full Rams. I think Kwesi was serious about that. It's unfortunate that Kwesi was most honest in his first interview, and like he got burned on it because he was honest about Cousins, and of course things like once you get away from the original source and kind of get into the megaphone, right, it sounds worse than it is. He was just honest. I mean, he's saying like the one thing about not burning down is like, how do you get a Mahomes or a Brady? I mean, the thing anyone will tell you is like Brady was a late pick and Mahomes I think was 10th or something, right? So like some of this is like you have to choose the right guy, and at 11 you can probably get the right guy. You probably can't get the top 3 given who's drafting there, right? And like is Penix, for example, is he a viable starter in the NFL? We just don't know. And so I think like there's things you have to work with the mechanics. I think there's some injury things. So, I don't see them going full Rams. I think if you draft Cousins, like the biggest thing I'm concerned with, because actually the offense looks pretty good. It's not like if you have Cousins, doesn't mean you can't get Reisner, right? Or you can't fill that hole. You have Hawkinson's under a contract. You can figure out his replacement if Hawkinson can't start the season. You have Jefferson. You have Addison. You can figure out receiver 3. I honestly think like Powell could be that guy, right? And like the offense will be fine. You can put a viable offense around Kirk Cousins. And I think the thing Cousins always asks is he goes, I'm going to handle negotiations in the offseason once that's in. And as long as you put something around me, right? Like as long as it's not like a borderline untenable situation like it was with Zimmer, like he just kind of goes, yeah, I'll just deal with whatever. It seems like he's willing to take criticism. It seems like he'll make fun of himself. It seems like, he's willing to kind of go with the ups and downs of the team or whatever. It's because he handles everything in the offseason. That's actually a good way to compartmentalize. The difficult thing is you look at the other side of the ball. And if you're Brian Flores, you go, hey, I'm coming back. We know, like for whatever reason, whether it's lawsuit related or how the season ended or whatever it is, I'm inclined to believe it is related to him suing the league. But like, he did not get the offers we thought he would as a head coach. I believe that he is a viable head coach, that he did great things at Miami, that he probably should be a head coach in the league. But you have Brian Flores, guy who should be a head coach in the league, who did a lot with a little last year. And he's probably like, hey, I don't want to do a lot with a little again. Like, he will continue probably to maximize guys like Ivan Pace and Metellus and some of these guys, Cam Bynum, who other DCs may have pushed aside and say, give me someone else. He's probably not thrilled like anyone that like, hey, you're not getting much from Scene. You're not getting much from Booth. I don't know really what happened to Osmawa, but like you're not getting something from these guys who they drafted. He's going to go like, look, you got to use this draft class to give me something on defense. I just think he will. And I think the other thing is he's going to go, hey, can we get Daniil back here? Can we can you sign some free agents here to kind of supplement this defense? Like it'd be nice to have a corner opposite Murphy and maybe a little more pass rush. And that's actually what it takes away from. I don't know if you have to go full Rams. I understand the thought process behind that it's like once you invest that money and once it's in the future, that's fine. With Kirk Cousins, we should be clear. I think you can kind of use that dead money, if you will, in an extension, as long as you get it done for the 13th when it voids. The problem is
Yes.
once his contract voids, like essentially that's just dead money no matter what, right? So like Cousins, it's an interesting approach. Now it's ambiguous, but I think he said March, which basically means, hey, I'm going to have 2 weeks of negotiations, and then it's either like the Vikings signed me or they didn't, right? And I think he's going, yeah. And then the way he presented it, like, yeah, my kids like school here, but there's also other schools elsewhere, right? There's schools in Atlanta, there's schools in Pittsburgh. Those are 2 spots. You have Tomlin. I don't know how attractive the Atlanta job is, but like that's like something you can use and leverage. That's a place you could viably go, right? And like, I think he's gone, I'll end up somewhere. I'll be on a competitive team. And I think the way, if you're Kwesi, is like you have to, at some point, if you go to the Wilson, hey, I'm burning all the picks and I'm spending all your money, they might go, yeah, I don't know if we love that. Like you're under contract for 2 more years, and really like most people aren't lame ducks, right? I think like they will either re-sign Kwesi, right? I mean, it depends obviously on how the season goes, but I think you either extend him, right, to keep him from being a lame duck GM, or you're looking at like, hey, do we have someone else come in here and figure this out? They bought themselves a little bit of time, obviously with the 13-win season. Everyone knows it was 11 one-score games. They lost in the playoffs to the Giants, weren't very good and all this stuff. And we understand how this season went, right? But like, I just think there's some equity with the organization. I don't think the Wilfs, as much as they want to win, I don't think they're like this. I think the reason why you do that in LA with the Rams is, yes, there are some historic fans there, but keep in mind, you kind of kill a fan base when the team moves to St. Louis. It feels like a different team when it comes back. And like there are, I'm sure, diehard Rams fans in LA, but you're splitting the fan base supposedly, right, with 2 teams. And like you have to get people's attention because LA's got a lot going on, right? With the Vikings, I think it's like the Vikings are so vital to this city, to like Minnesota, that I think teams here have a hard time going, yeah, we're just burning this thing to the ground. I understand there was an argument to do that, but I just don't. I think he was saying like, I just don't see an option to burn it down. I'm trying to win with like kind of the tools we have here. Like we could maximize the Zimmer core and then bring in our own. And I think the cardinal sin here is actually like you just missed so badly in that 22 draft that you didn't have the imagine if Scene was like a starting safety, right? Imagine if Booth was a starting corner. Imagine if Caleb Evans didn't take a step back. And I guess you could always do that with any pick, but what I'm saying is like, then this feels a lot different. Then it's like, hey, you actually have a pretty affordable defense that you just need to tinker with instead of overhaul in some respects. And then you go, yeah, we're going to overspend on quarterback, but you're doing that because that creates certainty. You know what Kirk Cousins is, or have a good idea. You have a better idea of who he is than the next quarterback coming in. And save for, I'd argue if they had lost against San Francisco, the game that San Francisco was favored by a 7, I think you start actually tanking then, right? And that's maybe the only opportunity you had really to get one of these top 3. Once you beat San Francisco and you full throttle, like no one's going to guess that Kirk Cousins is going down on an Achilles injury. And I thought Kenny Clark sacked him or something. You know what I mean? I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was at the game, watched it physically, and I was like, what happened? Like, why is he hurt? And it's Kirk Cousins. Like, of all things, he's never injured. So point being is just like, I think I don't see them. They're not burning it down this year. We all know this. They're also not going full throttle in. I think they're just like, hey, we need like a viable quarterback situation here. We need someone who understands Connell's system, right? And then like from there we go, how good can he make the defense?
So what happens if Kirk goes the other way though? Like what
if
if
he leaves?
Yes. What if they go, hey, here's 2 years, 60 million. We don't want to guarantee the second year because we want to build this team around you. And Kirk says, well, I can go to Atlanta, make more money, and there's a lot more weapons and a team ready to pop over there. Is there a path outside of Cousins that you're like all in on, whether it's a veteran? Sam Darnold's name was tossed out there, which everybody acted reasonably once that name was thrown out by Tom Pelissero. Or is there a quarterback that you're saying trade up for this dude and let's go? Like, well, let's figure it out. Let's get Darnold as a house of cards and let's have this rookie develop. And when he's ready to go, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Darnold, like he's one of those like Jets guys who has like, did the Jets just mess him up? You know what I mean? Like, is he just a product of like a bad environment? And it turns out like, I don't know how you can make that argument. Like, I just don't know how you could believe that after seeing what we've seen. And I just don't think Darnold, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he was not the Niners backup, right? Like maybe something changed when he went over there, but I don't believe in him. I think you'd have to get a backup people are excited about. I think people could talk themselves into like Gardner Minshew. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think you can do that with Tannehill. I don't know what's going to happen with Baker, right? Like, isn't it like possible that Tampa could go like, hey, maybe we should keep this dude around, right? You know what I mean? And so, like, I don't think it's Baker. I think, like, as much as you maybe get some momentum given his where he was drafted and stuff, I just don't even think Baker does that. I think there's just something about Minshew because, like, he's in the perfect spot where he seems cool. You know what I mean? He seems like a fun, cool guy. I mean, I feel like you and him could go to WrestleMania and have like a blast. You know what I mean? And like, I think, I think the expectations are right for him, right? The expectations for Baker Mayfield was franchise guy in Cleveland, right? It was I think it was 1-1. We drafted you to turn the Browns around. That's a pretty lofty expectation. And I think while he kind of recovered his stock a little bit in LA, I think with that weird comeback that he had, like I think he kind of did a Josh Dobbs, even though he's a higher profile quarterback, but like kind of showing up and led him to victory. And then I think like just what he did with Tampa. And like I remember listening to a podcast. It wasn't even like a sports podcast. It's just a dude who's a Bucks fan. He goes, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get killed this year." This is before the Vikings game. And so when the Vikings lost to him, I was like, did the Vikings just lose to like one of the worst, like 3 worst teams in the league? And it turns out like, yeah, probably shouldn't have lost that game, but also like, yeah, I don't know. Like Tampa was better than we thought. So I don't know. I think you'd have to do someone like Gardner Minshew. And I think like where the thing is, I think Cousins really boosted his stock with the Netflix. Like I wrote a story basically quantifying it, and I was like, yeah, I actually think like this meaningfully changed how we think of Kirk Cousins. I also, the way I personally see him is, yes, he like you can win with him. He doesn't drive winning. He seems like a decent enough dude. He is kind of in his own world, and like he is pretty smart in that like he's got a good agent. He is cashed in. If you had said the day Kirk Cousins was drafted, he'd make however much money he's made in the NFL, right? Someone would look at you and be like, wait, the guy the backup, like, Robert Griffin, like
Yeah.
that dude. And like, dude, he's smart at what he's doing. But I think like the thing with Minshew is like Minshew's always been liked. You know what I mean? For like, how many guys of Minshew's caliber like could you name or think of? You know what I mean? Like, is like Geno Smith's a little better, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
What about
given his
Case Keenum? Like, are
Case
they similar?
here,
Or?
Case Keenum here, right? Case Keenum is like because Case Keenum represented another overachieving team, and because of the miracle and stuff, I do wonder. I always go, that team did play 6 bad quarters of football before going in Philadelphia. I know we all expected them to beat Nick Foles. I know we all expected them to go into Philadelphia and win. I know we all kind of thought, hey, this is a miracle team that might go on a run and win it here, right? But like, if you actually look at it kind of pragmatically, you're like, yeah, the team kind of was bad for a while before I should say they had 2 bad quarters leading up to the miracle and then 4 in Philadelphia. But, like they played 6 bad quarters to end the season. So, I don't know. I think I don't know. Case Keenum here obviously would have that rep, but I just don't think like everyone around the league knows who Gardner Minshew is, right? Because he's like,
Yeah.
he's goofy, he's cool. I don't know. So I think that's the only way that works. I mean, obviously they'll kick the tires on various guys. I'm just telling you, I think they signed Cousins. I think Kwesi's going to try to put his foot down. Here's the thing. The other reason why Cousins may want to tighten the window on the negotiations is he may not want to spend his whole offseason fighting over what is essentially Kwesi probably going, can I do 1 year non-guaranteed the second? Cousin going, can I have 2 guaranteed? And then him exploring too. And the one thing his agent's probably doing is going, is Atlanta giving him 3 for 90? I mean, that to me seems like an absurd contract. Remember the Jets actually gave him a bigger contract, right? It was like 126. And he goes, no, I want to be in a winning situation. So this is not the problem. Is like with anything we think in black and white, we go Cousins pads his stats and only cares about money. And you go, that's not true. Some of his stats don't represent how good he is, as in like he puts up better stats than he probably is. He does really care about money. I think he has a really smart agent, as I said, and makes a lot of money. I also think he does care a lot. Like he did not like it when guys like Chris Thomason, former, Pioneer Press writer, would bring up his record. He did not like that he was a 500 quarterback that literally, if you looked at his record, he won as many games as he lost. He had like 2 ties in there, which is funny. And you know what I'm saying? Like he did care about that. I think he cares a lot about having the 13-win season. And he obviously cares about his image in some way, as much as he will try to kind of deflect that. Like, you don't do a Netflix show and then kind of talk about it afterwards and go, hey, I really care if I'm going to, and I understand what he's saying. He's like, a lot of people in my life, like I need them to be responsible with what they put on the air. But like that was crafted in some ways, right? He was literally breaking down the film on what Netflix put out there. And I was surprised personally as someone who like, hate Kirk Cousins, nor do I think he's like Joe Montana, right? Like I was surprised by what I saw and the reaction that people had to it, right? And so like he is a dude that cares. I think he just also is going to go to Atlanta and go, hey, if I'm playing in Atlanta, it's 3 years, 90, right? And I think maybe he's looking at a Steelers and going, can we do 260? And I think with Minnesota, he's going 260. And I think Kwesi's going to go, what if we do 1 for 30 and we'll figure it out next year, depending on what happens in the draft and what, I mean, I guess at that point, right? Like, Cousins probably knows they're taking a quarterback, but you don't really know who that is. But like what happens in the draft and then, how he looks
as he hears the shotgun pump in the background from the well. It's like, hey, what if we do like 130? Okay, 260 it is, fully guaranteed. Totally cool. Like a real shotgun wedding down in Alabama or something like that. I think this offseason is really interesting. It's really captivating because the quarterback decision is dominating the conversation, but this team needs a lot. Coming into this offseason, how close do you think the Vikings are to being a true contender for a Super Bowl? And I mean, what would you define? Is it getting in the tournament? Is it building a roster like we see with the 49ers or Chiefs? What do the Vikings have to do this offseason to get into that upper echelon of the NFC?
I mean, you have to have a quarterback that can run the kind of system. We talked about that. You have to shore up corner. I actually think Byron Murphy looked okay, but like, here's the thing. Like, I also don't know, like, are you getting Xavier Rhodes in this draft? You know what I mean? Like even if you spent 11 on that, I don't know if you're guaranteed that you have like a lockdown corner. I think you do have to address the secondary. I mean, I think there's some tough conversations, obviously, with Harrison Smith, who I'm a huge Harrison Smith fan, but we saw him slow down last year. I think you have to be honest about like kind of what Cam Bynum is. Like, can he get better? Is this who he is? Like, it's just tough given his age and given he had a sort of breakout last year. You need some sort of, unless you really believe in Ivan Pace, like some sort of Jordan Hicks. It doesn't have to be him, but like somebody who can run a defense. I like Ivan Pace a lot, and I think like they're going to trust him at some point to kind of be green dot, be the quarterback of the defense. Are you immediately doing that next year? You have to get Hunter. I mean, that's the problem is like you have to get Hunter. You have to figure out the Jefferson extension. You have to do all this. We're going to take quarterback out of the conversation real quick. I think Matt Freese wrote it on our site. I mean, I think you can go to other places too. The cap is one of the most misunderstood things ever. It's not truly like, it's not funny money. It's not monopoly money. At some point you have to pay out at some point, but like it is very flexible and it's not, I know people go, you need Cousins or whatever. You have to pay Cousins. You have to pay Jefferson. And you wrote a piece about this, how you would make that decision between the three guys, between Jefferson, Cousins and Hunter, but like you can fit them in. I think the way you've put it before is it's like a credit card, right? I mean, at some point you can go on the spending spree and like, one way I see it is like, look, if you're an NFL team, you can't, I don't know how many luxury items you're allowed, right? If you have to fit it within a cap, but like if you really go, man, I love my house and I think it's going to be valuable, you can go get good furniture and redo the appliances and whatever, and you can still probably afford a pretty nice car, right? It's just all like, hey, what are we doing when this is due, right? We can finance all this. I mean, that's kind of what you're doing, right? But like, how much do I pay up front? How much am I kicking down the road? The one thing about Kwesi being, you mentioned this, the 4-year deal, he's already been through 2 years, entering a third, right? Like, again, I don't think he can be like, hey, blow all your assets and I'm going to charge the credit card down the road, right? I mean, like, he doesn't want to have a good season and go, oh, I didn't think about this. You know what I mean? Like I didn't realize I have to spend, that money's not me. But like, I think also, he's going to be a little more aggressive. I mean, I guess you could argue aggressive was his first season, right? He went in 13 games, keeping the core together, stuff like that. You could argue this season was too. I mean, as we were talking about, like, hey, you're starting 0-3, and I know you have the extra playoff team, but like, how likely is it you actually reach that point? He did go get Akers. He did go get Dalton Reisner. They were aggressive throughout the season. I mean, even if you look at the Dobbs acquisition, like, for 2 games, I guess it looked like, it was like a pick swap, you know what I mean? Or whatever. Yeah. And then like, you kind of figured that out, but like there was an aggressiveness and has been an aggressive mentality throughout. I think the hardest thing for him is that like, there are a lot of people here who would applaud a Wall Street mentality and a probability mentality. I just think it's just like, I think the way people think, we like, or at least certain people do, the capitalistic, the gambling aspect of it, right? Like people kind of think of Wolf of Wall Street, and as much as you're like, hey, these guys are criminals, that's a really fun movie to watch, right? Everything, think of Gordon Gekko, right? That's a household name, and it's literally a made up dude, right? I think he's made up. And then like, you might want to look that up. I actually don't know if Gordon Gekko is actually a guy. But
I think he is, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah, but I think that's the original Wall Street movie, right? And then like, Gordon Gekko being like a household name, and like, we do like, yeah, there's something about like kind of you think of Vegas and like gambling and kind of the glorification of that. If he trades down and does it effectively, no one, I mean, there are people who bring up Jordan Davis and Kyle Hamilton and stuff like that. But like, there's less of that. The problem is when like, I mean, Kyle Hamilton, man, I think that Kelsey catch, right, in the playoffs, like one of the only touchdowns he gave up in coverage or something like that, right? And like, you imagine like Jordan Davis would be the first time you kind of, you build it along the line or whatever, like you make an investment on along the D line, and like, I get all that. And I actually think they should have he made it too complicated. Having said that, it's more that it just didn't work. Like Lewis Dean seemed exciting. Maybe he'll figure it out, but like he seemed like an explosive guy who could tackle, right? And like, I think, you look at Akela or Booth, like you're like, man, if he gets healthy at all, like he'll figure it out. And because that didn't work, like I think people are out on him, and that's the truth of the NFL. Like few people get an opportunity. Rick Spielman acknowledged this, right? Rick Spielman figured out, said, like, hey, it's rare that people are as patient as the Vikings were with him, right? And like, I don't know how most people would get one opportunity, get a second one, but it's like it's not guaranteed. Like Kwesi just turns around and like is a GM somewhere else, right? Like this is his opportunity, and it's just a massive draft, and it's he's gonna have to decide, like, do you go with certainties? Do we keep it at 11, just draft the best player there, or am I flipping 11 and trying to get multiple players? Did I miss out on Jameson Williams? Not a big deal. Did I miss out on Jordan Davis, Kyle Hamilton? A little bigger deal.
Gordon Gekko was not based on one person, but rather a composite of real life financiers, I guess you would say it. He was in Wall Street, which was 1987, and Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, which was the sequel. The main character in Wolf of Wall Street was Jordan Belfort, played by Leo DiCaprio. I don't know if he was a real person. I didn't get that far in my.
I think Belfort is. I mean, I love that movie. I'm not even a huge movie guy, like Brian, who's our editor, our football editor. Brian Miller like loves movies and stuff like that and watches all of them. Like I don't watch a ton of movies. That was one. Literally, I think it's like a 3.5 hour movie. I remember watching it with like two of my buddies, and I was like, I remember getting out of the theater. I'm like, why is it dark? And my friend is like, because 3 hours passed. And I was like, what? It's one of those. I was like, oh yeah, there was the Quaalude scene and whatever. But like, I just, you think about, and actually, like if you go into the boiler room's weird. Boiler Room is like a Affleck and like Vin Diesel and stuff right in it, I think. And like, it's that company, whatever Belfort's company was, from the perspective of a kid working there, right? Like just a dude. And really interesting movie. But it's like there's enough of that stuff out there that like, and obviously get big names to act in these movies and stuff. Like people love, I mean, we know this, people love gambling. I think like there are mixed feelings on Wall Street, but there are people who glorify that. My point is, I think there was some excitement. You go, remember, like, here's the thing, this is just, things change based on your record, right? But like when they hired Kwesi, and like he did his first introductory press conference, especially compared to polls, I think, right, was around that time. People were like, oh man, got the right guy. Like Kwesi he seems likable, and like he is. I mean, he's a quieter guy, but he's like he's very quietly confident. I'm curious if you got him in an honest moment, like if he'd be like, man, I just overthought this. Like why didn't I just grab Kyle Hamilton, right? But like I think he is quietly confident. I think if, again, like it's just hard because it's those two guys, right? I don't think anyone cares about Jameson Williams. I could be wrong. I don't even know, like with Christian Watson, the fact that they traded that pick. Watson's been good at times, but I don't know if people care about it. It's more that like Jordan Davis is staring you in the face coming from this Georgia defense. Like it's a D tackle. Like why not go grab him? Kyle Hamilton, Notre Dame, like you go, oh dude, like that's oh, that's Harrison Smith's replacement. And with those guys, I know Hamilton, I think, had some injuries, but like with those guys, like it just given their success, you go, hey, you overthought this. I mean, listen, you are the product of kind of what you do in the NFL, right? I mean, I think the one hard thing, like if you're this current regime, if you're O'Connell, if you're Davo, you go, we didn't get a lot of credit for that 13-win season. And I think like it's not that I've ever heard them complain about it or whatever, but it's one of the few instances where I was like, and I get why, but it's like people just didn't like that season. You know what I mean? Like in some ways they liked it in real time, but they like hate it now because like, I don't know if you know what to make of it. Listen, I was there in Buffalo and I was like, that's a crazy catch. And I don't know how that happened. I don't know how they pulled it off. Watching it live, I was like, man, it feels like Buffalo and the Vikings are just cursed. And it's like the two most cursed teams, like trying to outdo each other on the field with just like bad luck. But obviously they come out of that. That was the only game that they weren't favored in. Otherwise, like the Vikings, they just did it in a weird way. Won the games they should have. You just shouldn't have lost to the Giants. And I kind of wonder if it would have felt different. Obviously, if you go to San Francisco and lose, right, it feels a little too much like the Zimmer era where they lost in San Francisco, right? But like you would feel differently about it. You'd be like, that's one of the premier franchises, one of the best franchises in the NFC. Like, how much shame is there in losing that? It just feels different when it's like Daniel Jones, right? And like you kind of go like, man, that Donatel defense really came apart or whatever. So I don't know. I just, bottom line is you just can't have a draft like this again because you need the young talent, right? And you got to imagine like Flores is an interesting guy. Like he is a hardcore dude, but he is like personable from what I've gathered, and like the players really like him. He's obviously really smart. He just like created his own defense, right? It's a little like if you just threw a whole bunch of puzzle pieces at a guy and you're like, how did that work? You know what I mean? Like, how did he put together a picture? Those are like from 3 different puzzles and like it's missing,
I compared it to throwing a stoner in the Taco Bell test kitchen. Just like, all right, we got a couple of things here. Hey guys, it's a quesarito. It's great. Why don't you try it?
Yeah. And I think like there's brilliance to what it does. I do think the players really like him. I think like the other thing is there are some old, hey, Zimmer was like this. Like there are some old school coaches who just don't like young players. And I think like it was just interesting to me that he just like grabbed Anthony Barr and he's like, hey, you can have this role. And like Barr scooped up a fumble. Like, and I think it was the Chicago game, right? Like the one here. And like I think it's Jalen Williams again. Like I'm kind of doing this off the top of my head, but it's like when a Caleb Evans wasn't working, he was like, I think this guy, like who we grabbed in the practice squad, I think we can throw him in there. And I do think it's hurt some of these players. I do think like with Asamoah, that guy's super fast. You probably can't land a tackle all the time. And in this defense, like with Donatel, supposedly everything's in front of you. So there's going to be 3 guys running at the ball, right? I mean, with this, it's like, hey, we're sending 8. You got to make your tackle. And I think Evans had the same problem too. I think Evans probably can keep up with some of the receivers in the league. I just don't think he can bring them down. Hey, that's part of the job and that's fine. But also like these guys weren't drafted for Flores. And like, I think, I don't know. That's the gift, I guess, you got in having Flores is that like I think you can have a decent draft here, even if you don't nail every pick, because I think there's going to be guys where Flores can go, hey, I can't throw this guy on the field as a starter. He can't be out there every down. But in a pass rush situation, he'll actually get after the quarterback. In a situation where I throw 8 at him, this corner will bring down he might not stick with the best guys in the league, but like he can bring down any receiver. Like, hey, the safety understands how the defense works. He just, wish he was a little quicker, whatever it is. And I think like, I don't know, dude. That guy, I wish I could fully understand. I think Kevin Seifert from ESPN did a really good job kind of explaining like where he got this defense from, that he, like the Steelers and Pitt both have the same practice facility. And Flores was watching film with the Pitt guy and was like, hey, what should I be doing? Whatever. But also like to come up in a New England system that's so complicated. And like, I think there's I think of all these Belichick assistants who weren't any good. It's just like, sometimes you just have to be Belichick to make it work. And then to go like hey, let's spend a year with Mike Tomlin. Let's do this disjointed thing in Miami where the guy's trying to pay me, the owner's trying to pay me allegedly to lose games or whatever. And the fact that he can grab from all these different stops, including like literally just a year in Pittsburgh, and be like, hey, this is the defense. It was brilliant until like literally Jake Browning broke it. And then you're like, it doesn't seem as brilliant. But I think at that point you go, hey, I think you just ran out of talent. So bottom line is I actually think there's a viable way. And I try to, end these, like, I guess for the thought here, like, there's a viable way to make the Vikings win. Like there is a pathway in order to turn this team around. Is it going to feel like 13 wins? Is it going to, are they contenders? I don't know. I think it's going to be very expensive. I think it's going to be very sloppy in that, like, you're probably not getting efficiencies on all these contracts. Especially Cousins, but maybe Hunter, maybe obviously Jefferson. He's breaking the bank. He's not efficient. I don't know if it means like you're going to get good value in the draft. I think the draft might be as practical as hey, just come out of here with like 5 guys are pretty sure can play, right? And like, the other thing is in a draft where you're getting a quarterback that's not super efficient. If you're reaching for Penix, for example, and you think you can't trade down, like you might go, we used 11 on him and he probably could have used it on defense, right? But like, I do think there's a way for the Vikings to win next year. And I think the one thing about every team being good in the division is it actually kind of weirdly waters it down, right? Unless one team just pops, right? But like if we assume like Detroit's flawed in its own way, but they're good. Green Bay's flawed. Now, who knows? They may, with the new defensive coordinator, tap into all that talent, and then Green Bay's scary, right? Especially with Jordan Love. But it's like, hey, if like Green Bay is a good but not great team, if Chicago starts to, although I think Chicago's still maybe a year away, but like Chicago starts to tap into all the cap space they have, they get Caleb Williams, he takes off, whatever. The thing is, like the teams then beat up on each other, right? And like there's a way for the Vikings, a competitive, a good, not great team, to like hover on the playoffs, right? And it's really going to come down to what I want to learn. We talked a lot about O'Connell. We talked a lot about Cousins. What I need to learn about Kevin O'Connell is like, is he actually a situational master, right? Because it didn't look like in the first 3 games, and there's various points in the season where it didn't see, even like Cincinnati late and stuff, where it's like, man, there were some mistakes that were made that like did affect the outcome of these games, right? And so that's what I need to learn with O'Connell. I believe he knows offense. I believe that players buy into him. I think like he creates a good culture, right? I think there's all that stuff. I want to know like, can he get his message through, what he's teaching through? And is it 11-0 in 1-score games? No, but like, can we get closer to the 10 to 12 number? Because honestly, I think if you get 10 in the NFC North, you're probably in playoff position. And then from there, is the defense good enough to win the playoffs? Is it Cousins or whatever they do it, in the with the quarterback position? And then it's, how do you unlock Jefferson? Because I think Jefferson's a guy that if there's a chance, he will always give you the opportunity to win.
So we got a hard out here for you. So I'm going to wrap things up here. What is going on at Zone Coverage, and where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, it's zonecoverage.com. We have daily content on the Vikings, Twins, Wolves, Wild, Packers. But yeah, I mean, I've written a lot just because of the time of year where I'm kind of filling in for other people. I have about a Vikings piece a week, touch on the Twins, obviously a little more with spring training going on. Write the Wild once a week for our Wild site, hockeywilderness.com. And then Wolves looking good, except for maybe late season offense, but fun Wolves season, so I've been touching on them. So I'm kind of all over the place. Certainly we have writers for every team, including your 2 Vikings pieces a week. You chip in with the Twins and stuff like that. So we have a good staff for each vertical, really high quality stuff. Definitely check it out. It's going to be, as always, interesting with Minnesota sports.
Well, as always, you can follow me at the real Chris Schad on Twitter, yelling at people on TikTok, on Instagram, all of those good things. But that's all the time we got for today on the Viking Age podcast. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're on podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. For Tom Schreier, I am Chris Schad. This has been the Viking Age podcast.